Hey Kayla.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. We've had some quite fun topics in this podcast,
Yes,
right?
we have.
We have. From penguins to supplements to...
All of the Avengers.
All of the Avengers, yeah.
Harry Potter.
I think today I thought I'd maybe bring it down a little bit, make it a bit more serious.
All right.
But also very interesting. There's some sort of interesting points in this. It's not all bleak. Because I was watching a movie this week called Green Mile. Have you ever seen it?
I have not.
It's Tom Hanks' one. A few other famous faces. But the Green Mile is basically about death row in a certain state. I can't remember which one it is. It's a southern state where this guy is put to death or sentenced to death for supposedly killing 2 children. Mm-hmm. It turns out he was actually innocent. But, it's this kind of long story about his kind of walk to death. Oh, wow. And it had me thinking a little bit about the death penalty and about the capital punishment. And then, how it sort of is somewhat used and still used and whether it's right or wrong and how just about it a little bit. Okay. So I think today we should have a wee chat about that and see how it goes.
Yeah, that sounds...
Try to keep it upbeat a little bit interesting.
Yeah.
Not totally bleak, but there's going to be some kind of interesting parts of it, I think, more than anything else.
For sure.
Like a lot of the stuff we might talk about seems morally on the borderline.
Yes.
But when you hear some of the stories of why this is the case as well, it kind of brings it back down to, okay, that maybe makes sense. But we'll talk about it a bit later.
Yes.
So today we're going to talk about capital punishment or the death penalty.
Yes.
Depending how you call it. Alright, so in that case,
let's get ready to mumble.
Alright, I think we should start off with kind of clarifying what is capital punishment, what is the death penalty as such.
Alright, so the death penalty, which is also known as capital punishment, is when a person is put to death by the state as a punishment for a crime. So it's been used by nearly all societies and really extends to the beginning of like what we have as recorded time. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when you look into the death penalty, the punishment is called the sentence, and then the carrying out of the sentence is called the execution. And the execution is done by what has been done by like plenty of different ways throughout history. Uh-huh. Crimes that are punishable by death are called capital crimes or capital offenses. And usually now they're more geared towards like the really bad things like murder, treason, espionage, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. But early on, like in the Middle Ages and stuff, it was used as a normal form of punishment. Yeah. Like lots of people were killed just for things that weren't murder and like heavy subjects like that. And then it was used extensively during the witch trials too. So a lot of women were burned at the stake. I
think it's a couple of things that bring it into not into question, but how people have used it. Like first of all, your beliefs, because I think even now the difference between modern societies and governments and their beliefs and their sort of laws differ from that of sort of Saudi Arabian countries or Far East countries or African. All of them have their different understandings of the law and of the afterlife and how of the meaning or the sort of how life is, cost of life. How much is that? What is that worth to everybody? Yeah. So it is interesting, and I think we are more familiar, obviously, with the Western, slightly Christian side of things, since both of the countries we live in are based on that. Yeah. So we can't say too much about the other side, but I know it does drastically differ, and even nowadays. Yeah. Those religions do have a part to play in how it's sentenced, I guess. Yeah, and even
it was saying like during the Middle Ages with like when the witch trials and stuff were happening, it was all like moral. And so that that was mainly based off Christianity too, and it all came back in just like the morality of like the people, and so that's why they started killing people, which is kind of questionable in and of itself because like you're questioning the morals of these people, so you're just going to kill them. So what are your morals? I don't know. That gets into the whole controversy of it. I don't know. And
it's also like about who's more important or what's more important. Gender, for example. Is a male life more important than a female life? Whereas things like the witch trials or, again, I'm not too familiar, but some of the Middle Eastern countries have different views and opinions on genders and their significance or their cost. What's maybe a woman may be sentenced to death somewhere where a man wouldn't be for the same exact crime. Yeah. So a lot of that can change and differ. And I don't know if you have too much information on those countries, do you?
I have a little bit of kind of which ones still use. I was actually very surprised on that.
Yeah? Like how little or how many?
How little.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Because you often hear, and again, it could just be Western racism that, a woman was stoned to death for being raped by a man. I don't know, maybe that was a lot older back in the day, but that's still something that's sort of semi-rumoured about some of the Middle Eastern countries, which I assume is not true, but there may be some truth behind it. The Middle Eastern countries, I think a lot of it is their law system, judicial system, is that right? It probably is highly based on their religion. So do you have much information on Middle Eastern countries?
So in most of the Middle Eastern countries, capital punishment or the death penalty is still illegal. It is mostly for religious nature because the Quran allows for execution for like different offenses. But in Israel, most of the death penalties were abolished in 1954. So
okay, that's relatively recent. A lot of countries I found did abolish it after the war.
But there was in 2008 or 2018, there was a bill passed in Israel for death penalty for terrorism. So I found that in a lot of countries too. Like they've abolished it, except under like extreme circumstances like terrorism or like wartime crimes or something like that. And then Turkey fully abolished it in 2004 for all crimes.
Yeah, Turkey have been trying to get into the EU for a long time.
Okay.
And you can't, part of the EU, I'll talk about it later, part of the EU would very much disallow that. So that's probably a big reason why. So there are some countries, some of the Middle Eastern countries that still, so we spoke about how things like murder, capital punishment were the main focus of punishable by death. But would you believe that there are still countries that punish homosexuality by death? Yeah, it's crazy. So in Yemen, according to the 1994 Penal Code, married men can be sentenced to death by stoning for homosexual intercourse.
Oh, wow.
And unmarried men face whipping or a year in prison.
Wow.
And women face up to 7 years in prison, which seems ridiculous that women have more time. In Iran, the Shura law, homosexual intercourse between men can be punishable with death. Men can be flogged for lesser acts such as kissing even. Flogged, I'm not 100% sure. I think flogged is a type of whipping, but I'm not too sure.
I'm not sure either.
In Nigeria, the federal law classifies homosexuality behaviour as a felony punishable by imprisonment, but several states have adopted Shura law and imposed death penalty for men.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy. Qatar, I think Shura law, I'm not 100% sure what that is exactly, but that seems to be quite focused or quite adamant on punishable by death for sex for homosexuality. But Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Somalia, Sudan, so a lot of the Muslim countries which have the Shura law, I'm assuming, will be why that is. Yeah, so that is a bit of a shocker, but also not. We know how much the Middle Eastern countries enforce and uphold their beliefs. So it's surprising, but also when you have the US and the UK and all these sort of Western countries who are so progressive or trying to be so progressive, we still have countries, not a 10-hour flight away, or less than that from the UK, who will kill you for being homosexual. Yeah. Essentially. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Well, not for being homosexual, having homosexual sex. So I guess they have to prove that. But we're not, the Western world's not free from it, as we know. Like, I think you've got some more information about more Western countries that still uphold it.
So there are 103 countries that have completely abolished the death penalty for all crimes. And then 6 have abolished it for ordinary crimes, maintain it for special circumstances. And then 30 are just completely abolitionists in practice.
So abolitionists in practice?
Yeah. So I don't think they ever had it.
Oh, really? Okay, interesting.
Or since modern day times.
Yeah, okay.
So all European countries except Belarus, many Oceanic countries including Australia, New Zealand, and East Timor, and then Canada have abolished the death penalty. In Latin America, almost all countries have abolished it, but some countries still maintain it for extreme circumstances like treason during wartime. So Brazil, Guatemala, a few of them still have it just for the treason, the big the big stuff. And then in Africa, less than half have the death penalty.
Oh, okay.
In like the North America, the U.S. in the U.S., the federal government and 31 states maintain it. And then some Caribbean countries and the majority of Asia maintains it.
Majority of Asia?
Yeah.
Interesting. That's actually a lot more places than I thought. I think coming from Europe, I have a little bit of a skewed view on it. Like, we know the Middle East and we know America. We don't think about China or other parts of Asia or anywhere in Africa or even South America. So, and obviously because things like television really puts an emphasis, but that's where you pick up the American side, and obviously news, unfortunately, talks about the Middle East. But
I think that Asia and then the U.S. are the only ones that still maintain it for anything less than like wartime crime. Everywhere else is pretty much just like treason or wartime.
Yeah, I think we should explain that, because there's two different committing crimes when your country is in two different times makes a big difference, apparently. So you've got peacetime crimes, which is basically when your country is not at war with anybody. Those crimes are treated or sentenced differently to if your country is at war, physically, or in a sort of military war with someone else, and you commit those same crimes. Now, obviously, if you complete a domestic murder during wartime, that's not considered a wartime murder.
Yeah.
But if you commit a murder while over in another country to a civilian, that type of thing would be considered that. Same with treason; it'd be like being a spy or doing something against your country to the country that they were war with, not against another country. So it just needs to be specified a little bit, because I wasn't sure what that meant myself.
Yeah. So then in the U.S., there are 31 states that still maintain it. The ones that it's easier to name all the ones that don't maintain it because there's less. Alaska, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Iowa, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, North Dakota, Rhode Island, Vermont, West Virginia, Wisconsin, and Washington, D.C. They don't have the death penalty anymore.
That's interesting. Only New Mexico is south of like the halfway point.
Yeah. But then Colorado, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Washington have a government-imposed moratorium, which is that it's suspended for now, but if it needed to be brought back, like it's not gone for good.
Yeah, it's still in the law, but it's just not used, basically.
Yes. Yeah. So what about Europe?
Well, it's different in the same thing, because as we know, like oddly, we know America has its federal laws and then it has its state laws, and for some reason, which I don't, I guess we'll get into, but the states get to choose that. So as in, I consider that a federal law, but I don't know what federal law is, so therefore each state can choose it. And in Europe, it's similar but also different. If you want to be part of the EU, like the Charter of Fundamental Rights for the European Union and European Convention of Human Rights has an absolute ban on death penalty. So therefore, any countries who want to abide or be part of the European Union cannot have it. So we spoke about Turkey earlier, who are trying still to get into that, but still haven't quite got their shit down. Can't yet. So the big ones, France, Britain, Germany, Portugal, Belgium, all these places don't have it anymore. There are two countries in Europe, in the Europe land area, which still have it. You mentioned one earlier, Belarus, and the other is Russia. However, Russia, similar to Colorado and a few others, California, I think you mentioned, they are going to the moratorium as well, and that's been in place since 1996. So therefore, the last execution there was in 1996 for peacetime, and then 1999 for wartime. Okay. So yeah, they're the ones that happen in Belarus, which isn't part of the EU, obviously. They actually had their last death carried out in 2017, and that was carried out by a single shot, and they're still performing it at the moment. So it still happens. So 2017 in Belarus, 2003 in Kazakhstan, which again is sort of Asia, depending on where you look. Ukraine, 1997, 1996 was Russia, and then 1995, and a few others were 95. Actually, 1995 was the last hanging in Europe. That was done in Albania. So, yeah, that was all the other ones since then has been shooting bullets, which makes sense. The UK has a bit of a more interesting going. I looked into that because I was a bit more curious. The last hanging in the UK was the last killing. They never did shooting. Oh, wow. And that was in 1964. And it was suspended or abolished following that in the year 1965, and the last wartime was in 1953, and that was abolished actually only in 1998. So peacetime, so murder, anything like that, was abolished in 1965, but any of your wartime crimes wasn't abolished until 1998. Now, those ones consist of quite interesting things. It's not always murder. So you mentioned some of them earlier, but one of the most interesting ones was causing a fire or explosion in a Navy dockyard, ship, magazine, or warehouse. So until 1971, you could be killed causing an explosion, even if you didn't kill anyone, which is really strange.
What if it wasn't on purpose? Would they still kill you?
You could probably still get done for it.
Really?
Yeah. So that was until 1997. Espionage until 1981. Piracy with violence. So I think that literally means on a boat being a pirate. 1998. So you could be killed for being a pirate with violence in 1998. Treason was only in 1998. It was stopped. Purely military offences under jurisdiction of the armed forces, such as mutiny, 1998. And you could actually mutiny under various 6 different offences. So serious misconduct in action, assisting the enemy, obstructing operations, giving false air signals, mutiny, as we mentioned, and failure to suppress a mutiny with an intent to assist the enemy. So that's all sort of under treason, but I think giving false air signals, and I'm not 100% sure what air signals means, but I thought quite interesting that these were all not only abolished in 1998. I highly doubt they would have ever gone to fruition if someone had done these things, but they hadn't. Another interesting thing about this, so I'm going on about UK, but just because it's interesting to me because that's where I live from. When it was abolished in 1965, the peacetime, it was voted in Parliament every year up until 1997. So every year they had a vote within our Parliament. So essentially it's kind of like your Senate, where everyone had to vote for if they should maintain it not being part of the laws or whether they should reinstate it, which I thought was really interesting that it wasn't abolished for good, it was voted on for another 30 years.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. Yeah, the last guy to be killed was in England, Peter Allen. He killed a guy called John Allen West, just one guy, in April of the same year. And the last female was killed, she was 24, and her name was Vivian Teed, and she killed a guy called William Williams in Wales, just if you cared. That's some of the interesting stuff from Britain. But we had, killing for quite a long, murders for quite a long time. As I said, it was all hanging or various other sort of crimes. But the youngest girl to ever be legally killed in England was age 11.
Wow.
And although we know that she was killed, we don't quite know what she was killed for. So that's pretty brutal.
Wow.
And the youngest boy was in 1629, and he was the youngest boy in England. He was age 8 or 9, and that's for arson. God. Which is crazy. Imagine killing a 9-year-old for arson. They don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, I was supposed to say, he probably didn't even know.
Yeah. It's crazy. And it wasn't all deaths back. It wasn't all for murder back then, even outside military kind of crimes. Someone was put to death or hanged for 4 successful burglary, and then 4 successful escapes from jail. So he was put to death for basically escaping jail. A British admiral has been put to death for failing to do his utmost in the Battle of Minorca. I don't know if that's... I think it's Battle of Minorca, but it's spelled Minorca. Anyway, during the 7 Years' War. There was actually... In 1808, a guy called Richard Harding was hung. It says it was hanged, is that right? Maybe it is when you're actually being hanged, yeah. Was hanged for knowingly uttering playing cards with forged ace of spades. So he was basically cheating with fake ace of spades. That's right? Uttering playing cards with forged ace of spades. So he was forging playing cards, and he was hung for it. And that was only 200 years ago, which I know was a long time ago, but still. And there's a couple of people being hung for killing prime ministers. Attempted murder. The last person to be hung for attempted murder was in 1861.
Wow. It's interesting that I guess because it was so long ago, that's still a pretty long time ago, that it's all hanging or shooting.
Well, I think some of the, I think the hanging, people often, it's not choking, it's breaking the neck. So they do it from a certain height, and that's where you have that trap door. But people have survived that neck break, and then they suffocate, and then people have to kind of redo it, Yeah. They don't tend to just leave them hanging there.
Yeah.
Or at least that's the idea. But in the US, what do they do in the US?
So Now it's mainly just lethal injection. I have a couple of methods that have been used. Like you mentioned, hanging and shooting. With hanging, it's the neck fracture and loss of consciousness, but it hasn't been seen as humane because there are plenty of cases where it doesn't like sever the neck or whatever. Shooting can be done single shot or firing squad. Interesting. I didn't know that I think they said that they like put a blank shot in one of them so that when you do the firing squad, nobody knows exactly who killed the person, so you don't have to like take on that moral responsibility. Yeah,
I heard this recently as well, and I think a semi knew it, but also semi didn't know it. Like they do that, they have the firing squad, so no one feels guilty.
Yeah,
and then one blank, and then I don't know if the rest of the bullets, if it's only one. No, it must be the rest of the bullets. Yeah, which I guess makes sense. That's why, because a lot of they say single shot as well. I'm like, that's pretty brutal. That means someone is applying a single shot. You know, regardless if you make it a machine, it's still someone has to pull that trigger.
Yeah.
So the firing squad makes sense. Although it looks brutal, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Unless it's like 6 people and being executed, which is a lot worse. But
yeah. Lethal injection, that's used in the U.S. and 5 other countries. Electrocution, which is used in the U.S. and the Philippines. Gas inhalation. Beheading. Historically, this was done with the guillotine or whatever. But now it's only done in Saudi Arabia by a sword.
Yeah. You'd have to be a pretty brutal guy to be able to do that. Cause,
yeah.
You know, that guillotine, it's funny, you say guillotine, don't you? We say guillotine, I don't know why.
I may be saying it wrong.
No, I think it's just different ways to say it. It's got some weight behind it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. But imagine with a sword, that'd have to be a brutal swipe.
Seriously.
Yeah. Like, unfortunately, I've sort of brushed through clips of people doing it terrorist-wise, and they take a couple of good hacks to get anywhere near it. So I hope they don't do that, because that's brutal.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? The thing about the guillotine, people often relate that to France, but actually it was done in Britain, apparently, long before. Like, way back when I had some information about it, I can't remember where it's gone. But it was done in Britain, actually. There was a famous one in Edinburgh called the Maiden, which was about 100 years prior to the proper guillotine being posed in France. And that was used big time during the Revolution, where they got rid of the monarchy.
Yeah.
But they're all quite humane. I know in America, lethal injection is your standard, and they can choose for electrocution, and they can choose for gas as well.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone really ever chooses that. Why would you choose that potential for pain? I guess. I know some people, I think they say if you're really scared of needles and that will cause you trauma, that they'll if you ask for it, they'll give you something else. But I think what's more scary?
I don't know. But also, so yes, lethal injection is said to be the most humane, but there's also been cases where there is a lot of suffering due to like it's not done correctly or like the person's not trained well, because a doctor can't do it because they've taken the oath not to commit harm. So they can't be a part of it. So it has to be an untrained person delivering it. And like the needle, they missed the vein or...
I've only ever seen it, and I have no idea how accurate it is. Have you ever seen the movie Law Abiding Citizen with Jared Butler?
No.
So it's one where this guy kills his wife and child and then gets sentenced to death. Or he gets off by blaming his partner in crime who gets sentenced to death. And then it's like 10 years later, he goes for it, and then Jared Butler swaps out the poisons into something else, so it makes it really painful. But it just looks like 2 cylinders. Like one's a sort of goes into the body, and the other one's the one that activates it. And he doesn't feel anything. He's meant to just die. But I have no idea how it's done really. They are talking about potentially changing that out. Also, I've heard to like a nitrogen-based gas. Okay. So you get asphyxiated, but your body doesn't realise it. It still feels like you're breathing air, and you don't feel like you're choking on that. You just sort of you pass out and then you die because your body's not getting oxygen but it's still breathing, so it confuses it. Your brain doesn't get blooded, you pass out and you pass away. So there's literally no feeling and you don't even notice it. You just get dizzy and that's it. It's like, you ever been put on an anaesthetic?
Yeah.
So it's just like that apparently.
Okay.
Which kind of actually does seem a bit more humane.
Yeah.
A lot more humane than how they slaughter cows and stuff.
Yeah. So with the lethal injection, there's actually 3 different drugs that go into it.
Okay.
There's a barbiturate, and that brings on, so it's 3 at one time. So the barbiturate brings on sedation, and that suppresses the respiration. There's a neuromuscular paralytic, and that stops the breathing and reduces convulsions. And then there's a potassium electrolyte that stops the heart.
Oh, so there we go. So that was what I saw was probably somewhat similar, up to accurate. Cool.
Yeah. So it just puts them all three, and
that's it. Lights out. So you want to know some of the ancient inhumane ways of people doing it?
Sure.
So there is blowing from a gun. So people were tied to the mouth of a cannon, and then it was fired. So like a cannonball would just go straight through you.
What?
So animals used to be used to commit it. So it used to be like crushed by an elephant, trampled by horses, torn apart by horses. So you'd be like tied to like 4 different horses on each limb, and they'd pull you apart. They'd be stung by poisonous animals such as scorpions, snakes, or spiders. So there's a really very bad way called the blood eagle. So what happens is they cut the skin of the victim by the spine, breaking the ribs, so they resemble the blood-stained wings, and pulling the lungs out through the wounds in the victim's back. So this is by the Vikings. So they go down your spine, pull your rib cage open, and then take your lungs out. So that's kind of brutal. Boiling to death. So similar how to, you know how they all say you can kill a frog by putting it in some water and boil it, it won't jump out. But if you put it in hot water, it would jump out. They used to do that with people, but like oil or hot water or tar or even molten lead, similar to Game of Thrones. If you've ever seen that, guys, sorry, spoiler, didn't tell you who it was, so it's fine. Buried alive is the one that did used to be down for people who broke vows, Vestal virgins who broke their vows. Crucifixion, famous one. I don't know, I can't remember who was crucified. Brian, if you remember that, guys. Anyway, garroting. So you know how you have like garroting, choking with a bit of wire, and that was actually used to be done in something like the Netherlands or something. That was one of the options.
Really?
Like hanging, garroting, or like I guess chopping the heads off. Flailing. So have you ever seen the Boltons with their flailed body on their flag in the Game of Thrones? That used to be something. So that's when you basically skin someone alive. That's awful. Impaling. So you just impale people in spikes and hooks. You see these in some old movies actually, or even common modern movies. Poisoning's pretty common. Crushing, just weights gradually pushed on someone. It's hell whipping. I'm not even doing it all. Smothering. So they used to do a similar one to fixation where they just smother them with ash and fire, so they just couldn't breathe oxygen. Drowning, obviously. Stoning, which is somewhat mentioned. Sawing people in half. A pendulum, a type of machine with an axe head for a weight that slices over the victim's torso over time. So it's not a clean swipe, over time. So it's like a chop. It's like imagine like a grandfather clock just chopping away at you. Oh my god. Slow slicing, so methodically removing portions of the body over an extended period of time, typically with a knife, eventually resulting in death. Dehydration is also one, and starvation. But that's brutal. This kind of takes us on to the next part I want to talk about, which is like kind of the morality of it. And this is the meat and potatoes, guys. You've learned about what happens, then we're going on should it happen. There's a bit of a discussion, because I can't see the justification back then of doing it so brutally, unless it was things like, I think it all depends on who's performing it. Like back in the day, if you were the king of a part of land and then someone disrespected you by, I don't know, doing whatever, I guess it is revenge. And also back then it was really used to be a deterrent, I guess. Yeah,
like show up, like prove a message, get a point across. Like
I know there was some crimes that have been committed where bodies, and this has been done in like London and all around the world, the bodies have been put in cages and left like over the town square for people to view, and like this is basically, hey,
do not do
this.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of monarchies, a lot of establishments have sort of done that. But is that a reason to do it nowadays? Like a deterrent? Would you say is a deterrent?
No.
Like in Texas or Florida, wherever it is, do you think a man who either calculatingly like chooses to, first degree or second degree murder, I think it's called, I'm not sure, kills someone is thinking, oh shit, better not, just in case I get killed?
No. I think they're going to do it anyway. I don't think that, like, if you have it in you to kill someone, I don't think the morality of that goes, like, I don't think if you don't value that life, you're not going to value your own. And so, like, you're going to do it no matter what.
Yeah. And I think how many murders are committed in the US? We'll use the US for example because they're the one who sort of is a big discussion point. It can be. A lot of those murders are either committed out of passion or spur of the moment, or even some cases. I know, to be fair, the American death penalty is only used on the most severe circumstances or on sort of the ones where the murders are sort of, what's the word? Nasty, bad, brutal, yeah. So, a random shooting out of a cut might not be done, but even so, nobody's thinking about that. Because nobody's thinking about getting caught.
No.
Nobody commits a murder thinking, okay, I'm going to get caught.
No.
Or very few people anyway.
No. And just like I have pulled up the number of executions that have happened in 2018 so far, and there's 10 already. And
wow. Okay.
So, I mean, technically, no, these could have been committed years ago and they're just now being executed, but we're still executing. It's May and there's 10 people. So clearly, as a deterrent, it's not working.
Well, I think I'm sure I read somewhere, and I may be wrong in this, but in the last 10 years or something, there was something like 75,000 murders in, that can't be right. Maybe it was just Texas. Something like, it was about 10%, less than 10%. It was something like, anyway, less than 10% of the people who committed murders were sentenced to death, and even a smaller percentage of them, about 2%, have actually been put to death since then. Right. So clearly it's not a deterrent, because there's too small a percentage of them who are not getting put to death, and murders are all getting committed.
Yeah. And
even when you do commit murder, you've potentially got another 30 years before you, or 25 to 30 years, which I think is about standard, before you're killed.
Yeah, most of these people were middle-aged.
And so going by that, so straight off the bat, if you say, should these people be killed? Like, what would you say constitutes killing someone? Or the choice, or the giving not only the jury the option, or the opportunity to, say if they're guilty or not, and then the judge to use his knowledge and understanding to choose that as a punishment. What's worthy of it?
I have no idea where I stand on this. I think that in the places where it's legal, so it's going to be used either way. Like,
sure.
I think that there needs to be concrete evidence that it was that person. I think that there's too many times where people are wrongly convicted, and it's not just not fair, but I don't know, there's too much error that could happen. So
I get that, but also it's like, will a really good lawyer be able to provide enough evidence to make it not 100% accurate, and therefore you can't, when actually it's clearly he's committed it, but because he's got such a good lawyer, and because there's such things as contaminated evidence, or you can't prove this, or all these sort of things, it becomes almost like who's got the better lawyer.
Yeah.
Like, I bet you these people have been sentenced to death who just couldn't afford a good lawyer and got given some state-instated lawyer who's just not, up to scratch.
That's
it's
true too. There's so many different ways of looking at this.
And also, like, you have to have 100% faith in your judicial system. Because as a father, I'm not a father, but if I was a father and someone murdered my children, I would not settle for anything other than that. Yeah. And I don't think any father or any parent would.
Yeah.
And I know you hear on the news, we just want justice. What is justice? You know? It's like, in my eyes, if someone killed a member of my family, justice is them losing their life. A life for a life. That is like, an eye for an eye, a life for a life. That is sort of fundamental in a lot of
if you have no
philosophy.
regard for a life, then what should be the regard for your life? I get that.
Yeah, but then there's also, there's a philosopher called Nietzsche, a German guy, Friedrich Nietzsche or something, and he's got, like, as a hero you're killing monsters, something about killing monsters, but how many monsters do you have to kill before you become a monster yourself? And then you've got to think, well, you've got some like 14,000 people have been killed in the US since 1970, and that's only people who've been killed, never mind people on death sentence. Like, at what point 14,000 lives? That's a lot of lives being taken because they've potentially committed a crime, or they have been proven to commit a crime. Mm-hmm. And who's getting that choice, you know? Do they have no opportunity to make up for it, you know? And I'm also trying to think, if my brother committed a murder, would I want him to be sentenced to death? Would it be fair? Again, it totally becomes to personal preference. Like,
then I think it also goes into like the mental stability of the person. Like, did they do it knowingly? Did they do it like under what pretenses did it happen?
Well, I think that hopefully is covered in the how heinous the crime is.
Yeah.
You know, if they're mentally unstable, and you know, like for example, the recent Florida shooting in the school, that boy I don't believe has been sentenced to death. If he's been sentenced yet, I'm not sure.
Think so.
And I don't think he will be, even though he killed numerous people, because I think there's a question about his mental stability. Mm-hmm. But there's people who've killed one person and meant to kill him and then been put to death. So it's, you know, it's 12 lives for one. I would say that's fair, but do we have the right to make it 13? I don't know. You know, but there's also, I don't know, it's so difficult.
Such a hard topic, yeah.
And then you've got the people who don't care about their lives, who are just like, okay, well, money-wise, how much money are we spending on
jail? On
jail. Or is it cheaper to put this man through, to put him to death? Or no, because he's in jail for 20 years and then he has to be put to death. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, you've got all the appeals, because there's always appeals. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the courts having to pay for the appeals and for the, you know, defense lawyers. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And maybe just keep him in prison. But if you keep him in prison for the rest of his life, you're having to pay for that. So it's...
Yeah. I don't know. This is a tough one.
All right, got another question for you.
Yeah.
All right. 3 people have committed crimes. The exact same crime. They've all murdered their wife by chopping her head off. 3 guys, right?
All right.
One is a 22-year-old builder. Mm-hmm. Okay. One is a 34-year-old doctor. Mm-hmm. And the other is a 24-year-old police officer. Mm-hmm. Okay, they've all committed the exact same crime. One of them goes to a construction site, builds houses. Mm-hmm. Right. The doctor, he is in hospital. He's an A&E surgeon, and he's saving lives every day. And the other is a police officer who is out every day trying to save and protect, serve and protect. Do you think they should all be looked at the same when it comes to death penalty?
I do, but I don't think they are. Yeah. That's where one of the big controversies come in, because there's such a discrimination between each different, not just on like what they do or like social class, but also like race and gender, even age. But I mean, I feel like in that situation, the police officer would be given like that. The lawyer would take that more down towards a like psychological path, because who knows what the police officer's seen.
Yeah.
And the builder, he's getting put on death row.
You can just, and again, that maybe comes down to a good lawyer, what you can twist, you know, people into believing.
Yep.
You know, oh, this man was an upstanding part of society. He was in the police for 6 years and he did this and that. Or this doctor saved this many lives and he just broke because of the stress of being a doctor. And this builder built. You know, it's...
Yeah.
And we won't get into race, but there is a definite discrimination. The percentage of people that are sentenced for murder and the percentage of them which is sentenced to death is higher for certain races. Let's just say in America, more black people who are sentenced for murder are sentenced to death than white people, statistically. Not by much, but enough to make it clear that there's a difference. Yeah. Again, it could come down to the heinous of the crime. I have no idea what the crimes are, but statistically that's what the numbers are. What the crimes are and how they kind of reflect is maybe different.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I don't know. It's a tough one.
It is.
You know, like a 14-year-old girl killing, I don't know, a boy in the exact same way a 34-year-old man would kill a boy. Do they get the same? No, they won't.
Nope.
Of course they won't. But they've both done the same crime. They've both taken a life. They've both done it in the most calculating way, if that was the case. And
I think that's where the morality of it comes down to, because what makes it where the 34-year-old man should lose his life, but the 14-year-old girl shouldn't, or vice versa. And
it will come down to one judge.
Yep.
I'm not 100% sure it's done in America, but I believe, you get the jury and the people decide if they're guilty or not, and the judge will agree, and then he carries out the sentence, which he will have a set amount of things that can be performed or can be carried out, and he gets to place it forward.
That has to take a toll too.
Yeah, I think those people have to be so strongly sort of believe in the law that it's like they're not sentencing someone to death. They are giving them, they're providing people with the best justice from the law book that they've got. Yeah. But even so, you think it would. Yeah. I bet there's statistics out there that certain judges that, put it towards people towards death more. Oh,
probably, for sure. Like, I don't want that judge.
I wonder how it's done in other countries. Because I only know of America. I wonder how it's done in the Middle East, if it's as amicable. It's a strange, it's a tough topic.
It is.
And I really thought when we go into this, I was going to be like, yeah, no, of course you shouldn't be killing people. Why? But, man, if someone killed my brother or my daughter or my son, I'd be out for death.
Yeah.
I would say I did read something from a person who worked in a penitentiary, and he put 2 people to death during his life. Like, he coordinated it. Okay. And beforehand, he was like, yeah, that's the job. And afterwards, he retired from the guards or police, whatever it is. And he said that he's been not protesting, but sort of working towards getting it abolished since, because he it's been playing on his head the whole time. Which, again, is maybe a personal thing, but I don't know. And, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. And it's one that I don't think is going to get, just like guns, just like abortion, all these things in America, it's there's too many different belief systems, too many people who are doing this or that it's ever going to get sorted. Because you have 52 states with 52 very different understandings of the world because of the environment they live in. They will never be able to do it right. When you've got a multicultural state like Texas, you're going to have people who are a little bit more edge when it comes to that, because they have a lot more of that to deal with. Whereas you go up to Rhode Island, how many, immigrants do you have, really? Yeah. Or that are a different race, I should say. I'm sure you will. It's just, so when you're dealing with these different things, or, I don't know, it's difficult to say.
Yeah.
And until, I don't know. It would be interesting to see if they ever have changes, but I can't see it being anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be anytime soon.
I think you'll abolish guns before you abolish this. Well, that's not true, but I don't think either of them are going to go anytime soon.
I don't either.
You're more likely to find the states peeling off from each other before that happens.
Yes.
Texas will become its own country before then.
Yep.
Yeah. You got much more to say about that?
I don't. This one's hard.
Yeah. I am in the camp of I am 100% understanding why it happens. And I think people that do commit murder should face retribution, should face what they've done. But I don't think that should be put in the hands of anybody. And like, the thing is, it's interesting because if I was to kill someone who killed my son, and I did it, and so I say he killed him semi by accident, semi on purpose, but I killed him calculatedly, I would get in more trouble because I've done it calculatedly, knew exactly what I did.
Yep.
So it's
all very grey.
But my reasoning is justified in every parent's brain. I don't know. Yep. It's interesting.
None of this is black and white, and that makes it hard to be on any side.
Yeah. But I would, it's one of these debates that, I have stronger stances when it comes to a lot more things. I've spoken to my mum about this before, and she's no, we should not have the death penalty. But I think you have a good debate with her, and she'd be interested. She'd be like, you make a good point.
Yeah.
Whereas when it comes to guns in Europe, I put very much no, silly. Yeah. And when it comes to various other things, but this is tougher than I wanted it to be.
Yeah, this is one that you could definitely just go back and forth and not really have a final answer.
With that being said, there are many countries I do not agree with their crimes to have death penalties.
Yes, I agree with that.
I'm not going to put any, but I'm sure if you listen to the podcast, you know exactly what we're talking about.
Yes.
I think and again, that's never going to happen. It's more likely that America's going to change, remove guns than this is going to happen, but at least anytime soon. But that needs to be right. That needs to be changed.
Yeah, that's not good.
All right, well, Mumblecast listeners, I hope you enjoyed that one. It was a little bit more thoughtful.
Yes.
You know, inquisitive. Not inquisitive, that's not the right word.
Educational.
Educational, yes. Beats talking about Avengers. Well, that doesn't. I love talking about Avengers. But this one sort of, I don't know, was a bit more different, more interesting.
Yes.
For the Grandmasters. But send us it's kind of weird. I'm going to actually send an Instagram message of if you agree or not, but no, maybe not. Maybe if you find if you have any good information about it, like arguments on either side, let us know. Or if you can find the strangest thing. I don't mean like the worst thing, the strangest thing someone's been put to death for, like way back when, like 300-400 years ago. That'd be quite interesting.
It would.
You know, like someone's been put to death for stealing a man's shoes. You know, something sort of like that. You know,
I'm sure it's happened.
It's probably happened. Yeah. If you've got any evidence of that. Other than that, any suggestions for other topics? If you like the more interesting ones like this, the ones where you can sort of question morality, or if you want us to go back to talking about Infinity War or the next comic book movie, or even if you want maybe another Mumble Rumble, let us know. You know, we're still thinking about putting another one of them together. Maybe mention what sort of characters or what sort of people you'd like to put up against each other.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right, so we've got our Twitter, the Mumblecast, Instagram, the Mumblecast, the website, the Mumblecast. I think that's it.
Everything
We're
the
not on
Mumblecast.
Facebook yet. Everything the Mumblecast. Just add us, see what's going down, and we'll be back next week with something else. All right, I've been Liam.
I'm Kayla.
And it's been Mumblecast.
Bye.